Welcome to the Find Your Voice, Change Your Life podcast with psychologist Dr. Doreen Downing. Listen in as Doreen interviews people who felt they didn't have a voice or who suffered extreme speaking anxiety. You'll hear stories about how they struggled to speak up, what they did to find their authentic voice, and the confidence they now feel to speak up and make an impact. If you want to get started right away to find your voice, download Doreen's free 7-step guide to fearless speaking at doreen7steps.com. And now, here is Doreen.
Hi, this is Dr. Doreen Downing, and I'm host of the Find Your Voice, Change Your Life podcast. What I love about leading this, well, I was going to say a workshop. It's not really a workshop. It's a podcast, and I get to interview people. And what I get to provide for you, my listeners, are stories. Fascinating stories, stories that take you on journeys, maybe even back into your own life where you can relate to the guest and what they might have experienced. Not having a voice, maybe struggling to find their voice, and hopefully we give you inspiration so that you know it is possible to find your voice. Welcome today. Hi, Phil.
Hello, Doreen. Great to be with you again.
Yes, Phil is somebody that's been in my trainings, the Speaking Circle Facilitator trainings, and he's very active in the community. So make sure you look up Speaking Circles International. But I'd also like to read a bio he's provided for us. Phil
Okay.
is a communication and conflict resolution consultant with a focus on peer support for first responders and communities. With over 20 years' experience as a firefighter and a second career working in the remote Arctic Alaska oil fields, he offers a unique perspective on how to communicate and reduce conflict in personal and professional relationships. His avocation has become his life's calling as a speaking circles facilitator, and having been trained in mediation and critical incident stress management, he offers his services through his company, Expressways, the road to new solutions. Oh, Phil, I love that. Expressways, the road to new solutions. It's so clear.
It came to me when I finished a workshop down in Las Vegas years ago, right after being certified as a facilitator and having taken training for mediation. And I was driving up this highway in Nevada. I love those old desert highways. And it just like, yeah, I want to express myself in ways. And having been involved in trucking all my life, that's my first passion in life was for trucks and trucking. Seemed like a natural. So that's the story of that behind how that came about.
Well, I love the both on it, the two sides of the coin, expressing ourselves, but also like what we think about is roads and expressways, and what you said was path. But also, when I'm thinking about path, that means that we are coming from somewhere and we're moving toward time and space and we're going somewhere. Maybe we know where we're going and maybe not, but uh, but for today's podcast, I'd like to start with some, because we're talking about, at least in the beginning, the struggle, right? The struggle to have a voice and what might have happened early on in your life that it feels like you were held back from being able to speak up freely. So just give us some view, some snapshots, some stories, whatever comes to you about early life that give us a picture of what you as a little boy experienced.
One of the mottos in our family was "Don't upset Daddy," and the story behind that was that when my father was a teenager, his mother had been murdered, and we didn't want to talk about it. His brother was a teenager as well. And then moving forward, when I was age 10, my uncle was having some issues and came to spend some time in our family home and died by suicide one day. And we didn't talk about that either. So there was this underlying shame, fear, confusion, trauma, whatever it was, that made me feel like I don't want to talk about this. I can't talk about that. My emotions, whatever was going on. So there was this eerie silence inside me of what happened. We were told a story, sanitized as children, just so we had a brief understanding of the events. But it was much later in my life when I heard the whole story, and that had a big impact as well, which I can get into later.
Yeah, well, thank you. That was very articulate description of the events that taught you instantly to put a tape over your mouth and have a very tiny little hole if you're going to say anything. Not
Yeah.
much, but that restrictiveness around really a huge emotional event that maybe you didn't understand, and that's what we need as little kids is help understanding what's going on, that when people disappear like that. So yeah, you were gonna say something?
Well, when you talk about people disappearing like that, yeah, I remember I was 10 years old when that happened. And it had a big impact on me, of course, and on my siblings. And our recollections of the event for my older brother and my older sister, we as adults couldn't really remember the whole series of events around that time in our lives, where he stayed, where our uncle stayed, and this and that and the other thing. And it was really interesting to recognize how not being able to speak about things kind of shut down even remembering things, and the emotional impact it had on all of us. There was a lot of stifled emotions,
Uh-huh.
and ultimately for me was a lot of anger that came out, that stemmed from the grief and that stemmed from not being able to speak about things and events in my life. And it just has had a lifelong effect on me. And in a way, I'm still just getting over it in some aspect. It feels great to finally have my voice. This is the first time I've told this story this publicly. I've told other people in private relationships to put this out on a podcast to the broader public. Um, it means a lot to me. So thank you for allowing me to speak my mind and my experience.
Oh, well, I am honored that you chose me to be the place where it feels safe to share in such a deep and meaningful way. I heard you say stifled, and then it was about the voice being stifled. And yes, as youngsters, that's how we start to learn how to express ourselves and to process emotions. And we do that by not only speaking, but having people listening. That's how we find our voice. And it feels like that tape we talked about and you being stifled, that just left a whole realm of emotional worlds untapped and just locked away, maybe in a chest that, well, literally maybe in your chest.
Well, that's true. It was literally in my chest and in my gut, in my stomach, and tight diaphragm and heartburn and all these other physical manifestations of contained emotions. And it culminated ultimately, even just a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, where the anger that was manifest within all that could have cost me my marriage. And I had to learn how to deal with that anger that was stemming from an event that didn't even happen in my life, because the murder happened back in 1934. It carries on generationally. And now I have this opportunity to break that chain by speaking about a family issue and addressing the shame and the anger and helping heal my own relationship to myself, to the son and my grandsons. So it's a big transition time, and it's just amazing how that carries over the years.
Yeah, I think that one of what I'm just hearing now from you is what you said was the intergenerational, that healing, you're not only healing your own body and mind and self and soul, but future generations they don't have to hold it in and we shouldn't talk about it. It's like you are exposing, expressing, and showing how people can talk about very, very difficult things. So really like that you pointed to it being um, generational, and it didn't happen in your lifetime, but how it how it landed up in your gut, and then how it landed up in your marriage. Isn't that
Yes,
amazing? The connection between what we don't talk about and how it shows up later.
I've always had a fascination. I can remember, for some reason, when I really look at my life, I always go back to about age 5 for some reason.
Uh-huh.
I don't remember any specific event, but I just had this sense of an awareness of something. And I was always questioning. Um, and I call myself now, kind of jokingly, a wise guy.
Uh-huh.
Always asking why. Why are things this way? Why are things that way? Of course, I couldn't get the answers about this family event. But in conflict resolution training that I took, the big question was, why does something matter? What needs do you have to have met? Why is something bothering you? And as I ask why I feel this way, why I respond this way or react this way, I can examine more clearly where these things come from. I've always had an intuitive nature and I've always been interested in philosophy, psychology, spirituality, and I'm a pretty logical kind of guy too. So I'm finding this way to incorporate all these aspects of my life's vision and view and perspective, and moving forward for the next however many years I have left, try to share that with others and help them resolve conflicts that they may have.
Yes, I get also that because you've unlocked the constriction that has held your voice back, that now you do have freedom to speak, and that's what you are doing. And today on our podcast, you're revealing so much, and I think reaching so many people. I'd like to take just a quick break because I know I have so many questions about, well, what happened next? You found your voice, and what is this journey, and what do you, besides what you're telling us today, is around what we've already heard is the importance of finding your voice, and that if it had to say why are why is my life the way it is, and I think you showed, demonstrated that the why happened a long time ago for you. And I think that we need to help people look back on incidences, maybe not even in their lifetime, as you've pointed to today. Well, anyway, we'll take a quick break and be right back.
If you want to get started right away to find your voice, download Doreen's free 7-step guide to fearless speaking at doreen7steps.com.
Hi, we're back with Phil Blagg, and already I am totally curious about Phil's journey. He's told us so much already about what it was like being a young tyke who knew and was aware of some trauma. His father's one of his father's parents had been murdered. I guess it was his mother. Is that right?
Yes.
And nobody talked about it. And then an uncle committed suicide. Nobody talked about it. And what it's like for a little kid in a family where nobody's talking about major events, and how that changes and stifles a voice. Welcome back, Phil.
You be back.
So let's carry on. You said that, you as an angry young man in this world, almost probably disrupted quite a bit of early life, but talk a little bit more about anything that comes up, stories about your journey as you were growing up.
I was always a talker. No, we couldn't talk about certain subjects. I was always a talker. I enjoyed it and I told jokes. I just have a bubbly personality and all that. And my brother was a little more belligerent, angry, kind of a bullyish type. And I'm not blaming my brother for anything. He was 6 years older, bigger, stronger, faster, all that. But the culmination was really interesting. In the 1993, I think it was, I hosted my first speaking circle in my home and started studying more and participating more in speaking circles, and also learned conflict resolution. At the same time, as a firefighter, and a fire chief came into the station one day because I was helping my coworkers try to organize to have our needs represented because we were having some labor issues. This chief chose to rage in my face for about 40 minutes, pointing his finger, saying, "Nobody likes you. Nobody wants to hear what you have to say. I'm going to ruin your career."
Mhm.
I was off for a month for the stress that that created for me, and had to get some therapy, and finally figured out where that all was coming from. I was able to use the tools of speaking circles and communicating this style and the mediation techniques I learned, and was able to resolve a conflict within that fire department, and was able to make an exit gracefully and not burn any bridges behind me. So that was a big transition time, and other events transpired that just step at a time got to this place where I've reduced the anger in my life and feel more joy and happiness and put things into perspective now.
Listeners might not know, even though I've mentioned it here and there, about speaking circles. Say a little bit more about what that did for you and what it is.
As I say, I was always a talker, but speaking circles helped me become a speaker. And even though it was initially set up by Lee Glickstein to help overcome stage fright for public speaking, he had a microphone and a little stage he'd bring, an amplifier. It evolved and transitioned and became just the basis of who I am and how I communicate now. And they refer to relational presence that gets established through that process. And it involves not just, it involves breathing, that pause when we need to reflect, and truly listening. The first instructions are given to the listeners. Have soft, available eyes, and holding that person in front of the group in high regard. I transition that into what happens with firefighters, first responders that may have PTSD issues going on. And we can communicate in a new way by pausing and listening and tapping into that deeper voice and resolving that inner conflict that may be going on. So speaking circles has literally, really, truly changed my life in a significant way. And I'm hoping to give back to others to help them use their voice, listen to themselves, listen to their own stories, tell their stories effectively to resolve conflict in their lives.
Well, thank you for being such a clear communicator today and flowing along as we are together on this path of discovery about who you are and your inner struggle and your breaking through little by little and the processes that you use, conflict resolution and speaking circles. What would you say was, I know you told the story about the fire chief who pointed at you and raged on you. What's another breakthrough moment where you feel that you found more of yourself, more of your voice?
It's been those moments where I've engaged with the community of facilitators and then transferred that into my own personal relationship,
Mm.
including with my wife. And that involved being able to have the courage, sometimes it takes some real courage, to stay in that moment in the eyes of your beloved or in the eyes of another person that you may be having a conflict with,
Ah,
and speaking your truth. And it nearly cost me my marriage because I had so much anger and I had to tamp that anger down and look her in the eye and receive her responses and be able to trust that I stillness.
Mm.
EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reintegration for therapy for PTSD works great, but I recognize the eye stillness through this means of communicating and really be powerful in resolving conflict.
Oh, I totally understand what you're talking about. And for listeners, this may be a whole new concept about the eyes being soft and open and available. And in a way, they're like channels to the heart and to the what's inside of us. And staying with somebody's eyes help and staying with somebody and accepting whatever expression or whatever is being said from them is part of the what I understand what you're saying about conflict resolution too. Yeah, this podcast, Find Your Voice, Change Your Life, is not just about getting up on a stage. And I'm so glad you talked about using your voice in the way of being with your wife. Uh, we're almost out of time, but I want to make sure that you get to talk a little bit about Expressways and, this whole idea of the road to new solutions.
That's been a dream or a vision that's been about 20, 30 years in the making. And I've recognized that because I don't have any college education, any degree, I've been a blue collar worker all my life, trucking and firefighting. And yet I've learned these processes and put them into practice myself. And I'm able now to feel grounded enough to offer these to other people. So I'm transitioning from feeling the satisfaction of what I did in my working life to feeling fulfillment in engaging in my life's work. So this is just being launched. It's been in the mind and a vision for years, but I'm just launching a website and just putting the programs together. And I feel like by sharing this time with you, Doreen, you've been so instrumental in this through working with you and with Lee. It really is an honor to be able to share this with you and see where we go together in the future.
Right. Well, in a way, it feels like you are in a process of launching your business, right? The Expressways and the road to new solutions. I want to just stay on that before we wrap up today because I think that the that has so many levels for me in terms of this idea of what I said earlier when I first introduced you is where we're coming from. And when we look at you, where you came from, and the journey, which is, the path, and in a way, the path you never would have known that as a firefighter and first responder and trucker, that you would be doing transformational work somewhere down the line like you are now. And that's amazing. Although I understand that at 5 years old, you had dreams and visions. And so there must have been an inner, something inside of you, your soul that was taking you slowly to this moment in your life where you get to stand up and say, I can help.
It's interesting you mentioned that because one of the recent workshops, I guess we'll call it, that you did with Janine Bolin, who refers to herself as a shaman, I have this sense of timelessness and access to understanding things in a certain way. And so that's always been like an avocation on the side. And I've gone from doing to being. And one of the challenges was in trying to launch the business is it's so difficult to quantify how different I feel or help other people feel reducing anger. I could quantify putting out a fire. I could quantify making a delivery. This is about quality of life and how you quantify the quality of life. And I have some tools and ideas on programs that I can put together that will help people do that. But being that logical measuring logistic person, versus this qualitative, intuitive, engaging in other realms person. It's been an interesting transition, and we'll see where we go on this road together.
Oh, Phil, thank you. Those are wonderful last words. I really appreciate you and your courage to stay on the inner journey and to now bring this wonderful new idea to folks about expressways. And it does have something to do about the way we express ourselves. Thank you so much for sharing today.
Pleasure, Doreen. It's always wonderful to be in your presence.
Thank you for being with us today for this episode of Find Your Voice, Change Your Life. Each person Doreen interviews shares what has helped them find their voice. You can learn from these guests and find your voice so you can be confident to speak up and speak out. And remember to download Doreen's free 7-step guide to fearless speaking at doreen7steps.com. We hope you enjoyed this show and will return next time. Until then, goodbye for now.